Welcome to Kelly's Quest, the Transnational Journey, 50 states and 50 stories. Etched onto the Liberty Bell is the verse, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof." These words call us to action, and throughout history, Pennsylvanians have been answering the call. William Penn, the first governor of Pennsylvania, wanted to create a society and constitution where all people were equals. In 2000, Charlene Arcila saw that marginalized people in Philadelphia, including transgender people, were receiving inadequate health care. In response, she established the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. It has since grown into a national 3-day event. Ovid Amorson, a youth minister and passionate advocate, represents that sense of liberty that we hope to achieve in our lives. The liberty to define ourselves, the liberty to be ourselves, and the liberty to love ourselves. I first met Ovid at Camp Aranutic when we were counselors and became friends. Ovid!
Hi, Kelly! Oh, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
Okay, so Ovid, thank you so much for coming to play the first round of disc golf in your life with me here at Fort Washington Disc Golf Course in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. Very close to your church that you're from, right? Chestnut Hill United Methodist?
Yep.
So now you're about to hear one of the greatest sounds ever when you throw that into that. Isn't that a satisfying sound?
That's nice.
How did you get involved with working with youth and like in particular trans youth?
Well, grown-ups are kind of boring sometimes. So I think I started with that. One of the first kind of more like gender role non-conforming kids I worked with happened when I was around 18.
Okay.
And I was doing an externship as a part of a high school requirement. And mine was at a daycare. And I noticed 2 kids, and both of them had behaviors that were considered by a lot of the other adults as like something maybe they shouldn't be doing, or something that was for like the opposite sex kind of kid to be doing. You should be playing with this, you should be wearing, right, you should be playing this, that kind of thing. And I started noticing that's when I knew that I was trans, but I wasn't really out so much. But I knew what it was like, and I knew what it might feel like to be a kid and having a grown-up, saying, "Don't play with that, put that down, right. That's not for you."
And there you are witnessing it also with you being a trans person, yeah. So I'm sure there was some effect on you as well hearing it. Yeah,
I sort of made sure that I talked to those kids and stepped in and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" Or like, "Here's some toys," or like, we all of us can play with any of these toys. They're not girl toys or boy toys or things like that. Right. And that experience, especially, that might have even like propelled me more to be more visible and embody my gender.
That age being themselves, or attempting to be.
Yeah.
Kind of brought you out also.
And letting them know, and mostly letting my the adults around me, we don't have to like dress like this, or we don't have to look like this, or there's not a need, or you don't need to reinforce these certain things. And I knew that not everybody could do that, or not everyone could make that same room for those children. I think that was with me for a while. That was with me for a while in my own growth, and then in being around other children, and in eventually becoming a daycare classroom teacher, or a facilitator of a youth group, being able to make space for children that might not have that same amount of room somewhere else. And so I had to try to get a lot of people to understand they are role models, because they're being very bold and they're being very authentic, and at a much younger age than many other people, whether it's trans folks or not, being able to know who you are and to be yourself and to walk around the world. And then a lot of the kids will say, "Well, this is just who I am, so if you don't care, oh well." And it's
I wish I could have had that growing up, exactly.
It's so amazing to do that.
To see children getting to be their authentic self, and to witness them creating their own, they're creating the language right now. We're watching them reinvent what it means to be yourself.
Yeah.
I think I understand something, and then I go hang out with 7th graders, and I'm like, oh, I've got to relearn everything all over
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
You found out about Camp Aeronautic through the Philly Trans Conference. Did you go to the Philly Trans Conference because it was part of your transition process? It's like you were transitioning and you heard about the Philly Trans Conference?
There's a bookstore in Philly called Giovanni's Room, and it's an LGBT bookstore. And I had gone in there and I saw a flyer for a group called T-Man, and a trans masculine advocacy network. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool, but I don't know if I could go to something like that. And even though the conference was in Philly, where I'm from and where I've lived all my life, I'd never heard of it. Someone from New York, actually, one of my friends on the internet,
Amazing.
yeah,
It's wonderful.
that's where I met the first trans folks. Was like, oh yeah, are you going to the conference in your own city that is free? And I was like, I've never heard of this before. Sure, I'll be there. So I went and I looked at the website and I looked at all these workshops and I said, oh, I'm going to go to this and this and this. And maybe the second or third workshop, I met up with some of the folks from that group, T-Man, and they're like, okay, and they're just like, okay, yeah, now we're going to this workshop, and I just sort of like threw away the plans I thought I was going to, because I'd finally met up with that group,
Right.
and they just kind of scooped
Was
me
that
up.
the first time you met a transmasculine person?
I think that was the first time I met any trans folks in person that I know of. But I did like 3 years of going to that conference.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, especially because I'm in Philly, now it's time for me to give back. So I did 3 years of helping to organize, and I did some of the youth track and the people of color track, and helping to select workshops and provide things for those specific populations.
Do you want to play some more disc golf now?
Oh yeah.
Me too.
Yes.
Let's go, Joe. Swing away then.
Okay, this is gonna be my last practice one, and then I'm gonna be for real.
Middle.
Yeah, that was the last practice. That was the last practice.
Ovid and I come from two very different places in life. I wanted Love's perspective on what social justice and intersectionality looks like in their life.
There's a lot of things that are happening, and I think especially in the social justice world, many folks are like aware of some of that kind of stuff and like beyond some of that kind of stuff, but structurally things are a lot behind, and so it becomes necessary for folks to, like the word that was going to come out was interrupt, but I don't think it's interrupt, it's like take back the space that is ours. I think that a lot of folks often don't like comprehend the reality of the urgencies and emergencies that some that are other people's realities. I think some people might think that we have to just wait our turn or be polite or ask this way or and all of that. Some people just want to live and breathe like right now while we're here, and some of us have to tell other people what to be doing. And some of us have to move back, and some of us have to learn how to listen differently. Like with the memo, the memo that maybe the New York Times had out about the government and trans folks, and then a whole lot of trans folks are like, how can this happen? How can someone take my rights away? How can someone think that I don't deserve this or not be human? And then some of the rest of us, I for one, like it's not good for me to like believe that someone is going to give me rights in the first place. I wouldn't trust, a large institution to say, oh yes, we're going to do this or not. I don't trust a large institution to care about me when I already know they don't for other reasons. So, and it means that a person like me has lived that kind of like, that's the kind of stories of my people. We've already done some kind of strategizing. We already are a little bit ahead in some ways than folks who are not so used to I guess, discrimination or oppression in those ways. So it makes sense to hear from those folks, I think.
When the institutional aspect of the discrimination started happening, I wasn't ready for that, because I did have this sense of justice that was, I'm already your equal, and now you're trying to say I'm not your equal anymore. And I think that it's important for me to understand that I bring that with me, and I can't help but bring that with me, that I was able to afford this. I didn't know what it was like to be discriminated against until I transitioned. And I think that just listening to stories is how I'm evolving through this, and hearing stories from different people. Now, I identify as a trans woman, so I lost male privilege when I transitioned, and I lost white male privilege, but I still kept white privilege, quite a bit of it. When someone says, how do you identify, how do you explain your identity to people?
I like to say I'm a shapeshifter. That's what makes a lot of sense to me, especially spiritually. Sometimes it depends on who's asking, or like how permanent the answer needs to be, or
So the situation, are you safe answering honestly?
Yes, in Philly right now, there's or I guess in Pennsylvania, now there's a third gender marker option. I carry a health insurance card, I have my state ID, and I have, I don't know, however many other documents, but my documents they don't have the same marker on them, and they don't need to have the same marker on them because they're for different things.
Are you comfortable with all the different markers on them?
Yeah, I think like my health insurance is female, and I think that's what makes sense for me and my life, my body. And then currently my state ID has a male gender marker, but now there's a third option which is more consistent with who I am and how I am in different spaces. But I thought about it for a really long time, whether I wanted to have an X. Like, I want to have an X, but do I want to carry an X? Do I want to carry something that is not male or something that is not female? Do I want other people to see that? I don't know. I don't know if I want other people to see my ID. Sometimes I don't know if it's like safer or more dangerous to have a male gender marker.
Your pronouns, then, I imagine, are fluid also?
Yeah, I really like, lately I've been using love for my pronoun. It seems to make it just makes a lot of sense. Like, where is Ovid going? I don't know. Maybe love went to the store. It just makes sense to me. They, them, their, I like to use, or like to be used to refer to me. He, him, his is something that was really important to me, and I think I'm outgrowing it. And I think part of why I'm outgrowing it is because I always say this when we talk about pronouns with different folks. We should not assume that just because someone's pronouns are a certain thing means that we know anything about any of their gender or genders.
I was raised incredibly binary. Like, I can't even explain how binary I was raised. And to now understand at this late stage, even after I transitioned, I didn't know that there was anything besides the binary. And now I'm looking back on these kids and I'm just like, maybe this explains sometimes why my gender expression was off of one way or the other.
Pronouns are not necessarily indicative of gender.
So we were talking earlier, you heard about the Philly Trans Conference, and you went for 3 years and you're like, oh, I now need to go pay it forward and do this. And did you work like with a youth track the whole time you were at the Philly Trans Conference? Is that what you did?
Those meetings and a lot of things that are being planned,
Right.
the ways that the meetings happen are happening in a way that are not accessible to young folks, whether it's language or the process or just the sitting around a table doing stuff. And I thought, why can't we have a youth keynote speaker? That way, the whole the whole conference would have to listen to that young person.
That's a great idea.
It was very, and also, we can also have youth who are leading workshops, and because they're experts on things. I was in a workshop that it was like a medical workshop, and folks with like parents of trans kids go there, like all kinds of folks. But that's one of the populations. Trans kids were also going to some of the workshops. But the way that the medical professional was presenting the information was geared towards folks who've already had a puberty. And so what they were talking about in terms of a medical transition is not relevant to younger folks.
Right.
And I don't know then if there was something for younger folks, but that was the equivalent. But to me, I wanted to see it. I didn't want the conference just to be something that adult professionals just go and we wear our outfits and we have our briefcases, or I don't know, that's how I see it.
I was picturing your adult meeting.
I mean, I wanted to feel accessible to all kinds of folks, but particularly folks who are younger. So one of the things that I worked with a couple of youth who we did, I think the first year we had a keynote speaker, and the next 2 years I organized a youth panel, so that was kind of like the keynote thing. So, and that was really great. And one year there were siblings of a trans kid on the panel as well. So it was a range of experiences, folks who were experiencing homelessness, or who had experienced homelessness, or were in foster care, a range of, some folks who were in college, some folks who were in high school, raised this way or that way, and
accepted or not accepted.
Yeah, and it was great to, I don't know, I loved, that was one of my proudest moments, I think, being able to, I'm no, this is your thing. You tell it, you moderate it, you tell these folks, and these folks
That
will
is a wonderful
listen.
feeling. It's listen, here are the skills. Go do it.
Yeah.
And
Also, I'm an artist, so I have a book that I'm in. One illustration is in. That's about trans folks too. A short little story, but it's about, it's kind of about how to love yourself when the world is kind of telling you should be someone else. So the images in the book are two brown folks, and they don't particularly have genders, but they both are figures that I've never seen. I've never seen in picture. I read a lot of picture books in my line of work. I don't see a lot of brown boys with long hair. I don't see a lot of maybe masculine folks with flowy articles of clothing. So that's what I wanted to see. So my first published illustration is it's called The Heart of It Anthology. It's number 3, because there are 2 other anthologies, but those are the 2 images, and there's a young person, and then there's an elder. So it's the 2 characters, a child and elder.
Ovid's work as the youth minister at Chestnut Hill United Church gives them a chance to be a possibility model and to make sure trans youth have a voice in the church.
So one of the things that the church is working on, we've been working on for a couple of years, is a week-long experience for trans kids.
Okay.
And it's going to be, so it's not just that particular thing, but it's the whole year of programming that is relevant to either building up that community and figuring out what those activities and programs and what that space is for folks in our congregation who are not trans or have not had so much experience with trans folks, I guess even particularly in a religious setting, offering programming that that will, I guess, help them understand more about some of the experiences that trans folks have. Thinking a lot about experiences of trans kids and families of trans kids, and how, as a church, we can be supportive and present and welcoming and inclusive when a family with a trans kid walks through the door for church and not just for our camp. And yeah, we are one of the kind of churches that that doesn't just say, yes, you know, your kind is welcome here. It's, I am on the staff, and that's really great. And if I wanted to go into, you know, seminary, that would be supported. We are, you know, committed to investing in trans adults, especially as like possibility models. That's a great, I love that term.
What does that mean?
It means that if I'm a little trans kid, I can look at you and say, oh, like that's what I can be like when I grow up. I can be this great disc golf player. And
that's my true identity.
Yeah.
Far more than trans is this golfer.
I could live this life and I could do this and do that, and like that's what it might look like.
Okay.
Know? Kelly is what my life might look like when I'm older.
Right now, you work at a church as a youth minister.
I'm the coordinator for children and youth, so I do like Sunday school. There's also a youth group. They're on a field trip right now. Some of them say to say hi.
You can say hi to the entire group if you want to.
Hi, Sunday school. Oh, I also had done kind of earlier, closer to this trans conference days, was doing more facilitating like youth groups, like queer youth groups. I wanted to see if I could go back to the spaces where I used to be in when I was a kid. And
so when you say the spaces, the same school?
Yeah, the same school, the
Wow.
same, and I wanted to see if it was like what it would be like now for a kid like me, then now.
Right, gotcha.
So and I also was in I grew up in Philadelphia, but went to school for many years in the suburbs, and so in the suburbs of Philadelphia there have been less resources. Philly has a huge population of trans folks. There's a lot of resources in Philly, but not exactly in like the suburban areas.
Okay.
So it was important for me to like thinking about what might be needed, or how to connect some of those youth and families or organizations with some stuff happening in Philly. I think things had progressed from when I was a kid in many ways. And I'm also a person who's like, no, it needs to be changed. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be better right now.
Do you think that trans people, by our very natures, are change agents?
Sometimes I use the word trans people of faith, but I also, in many ways, think that, and sometimes when I use that, I mean like a spiritual, religious thing.
Right.
But I also often think about if you're a person and you know who you are, and not necessarily anyone else knows who you are, but you're like, this is who I am, and I gotta get to that point. Like there's like a faith and a hope that's in you, and if you're a person who's like, I need it, I need this, and you get there, then you have exercised faith, you have exercised hope, you have exercised those kind of things. And I think because we do those things tied to something like gender that is so core to a lot of the ways that society is, like if we said it was like a mountain, like if we can move that mountain, then it's easier to move any other kind of mountains. Then you're like, no, these kind of things are possible.
Right.
I think there's like something very specific about trans people. It's not even tied to like having a transition, whether that's physical or medical, or it's just that this is who we are. I think we're just a different kind of people. I think on purpose we're a different kind of people, and I think many of us are here for that.
To be the change agent?
Yes. I have a lot of these identities, and a lot of these identities are a lot of the identities that are not the ones that are normatively privileged or normatively thought of, or that people even know. Like I'm a lot of things that people aren't even aware exist.
Right.
So, and there's some parts of me that I don't even know what they're called, but I can just feel them in myself. And so there are times when I come into a space and I need things to be this way so I can do this. I need things to be this way so I can understand. Having a lifestyle that is an artist and a like childcare provider is I'm not often navigating like the regular. I'm playing. I'm working on a Sunday in a supportive community where we want to talk about the type of things that I am, where we recognize that who I am is like divine and holy and things like that. Or if I'm with friends and it's kind of the same thing. I also have, part of my journey has been to stop like saying yes to things or putting myself in spaces where I can't bring my full self. I'm like, there's nothing in it for me. If they don't want to take all of who I am, or they're not ready for all of me, then, or there's not going to be other comrades who are supportive or the same as me, then that can stay over there and I can stay over here until they grow more.
Okay. Okay, folks, back to the disc golf slow-mo style. A couple of years ago, Ovid, I went to throw a disc and I was in a tight situation. I reared back to throw, and when I came through, I hit myself in the back of my head with my own disc.
At least it wasn't bowling.
As I'm going on this journey, what I'm doing is I have a disc that I'm getting all of my guests to sign, especially my trans and non-binary guests. And I would be honored if you would sign this disc and put what state you're representing on.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for telling me this was in my backyard.
Thank you, Ovid, so much for this.
Kelly.
Ovid's love is real, and I feel fortunate to call them my friend.
You got that.
Our next episode finds us in Rhode Island, where I spoke with Stephen Alexander about bridging the gaps between state guidelines for transgender students and the implementation of those guidelines. Stephen is one of the first openly transgender people to coach middle school sports in the nation. I want to thank everyone who made a donation. Your generosity is what makes the Transnational journey possible. To help grow the show, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.